Before you take this house, Your Grace, you should know the debt bears the signature of a dead man." Clara Bennet's voice did not rise above the winter wind, yet the words stopped Duke William Ashford more effectively than any locked door could have done. Snow clung to the shoulders of his black wool coat, and behind him, a dark carriage waited beneath a sky the color of iron. He had traveled nearly 40 miles to collect $10,000 owed to the Ashford estate, and he had expected excuses, tears, perhaps even a desperate plea. He had not expected the young woman standing before him. Clara wore a plain brown dress beneath a faded shawl, her chestnut hair pinned with more care than money, her pale face tired but composed. One hand rested against the weathered doorframe. The other held the document bearing his family seal. William's gray eyes lowered to the page. "My father has been dead for 3 years," he said. "The agreement was written 2 years and 9 months ago," Clara replied. The wind pressed against the little house, making the hinges tremble. Behind her, somewhere in the dim interior, a child coughed. William's solicitor, Edmund Pierce, stepped closer. "Your Grace, forged signatures are a common defense among debtors." Clara looked at him only once. Then perhaps common defenses deserve uncommon attention. William should have been offended. Instead, something in her restraint unsettled him. She did not speak like a woman who believed herself safe. She spoke like someone who had already lost everything except the right to stand upright. "May I see it?" he asked. Clara extended the paper. Their gloved fingers nearly touched, but she withdrew before they did. William examined the date, the seal, and the elegant signature at the bottom. It resembled his father's hand perfectly. Too perfectly. "Where did you obtain this?" "It was delivered after my father fell ill." Thomas Bennet signed beneath it. He signed because he was told refusal would send him to prison. Her voice remained steady, though her fingers tightened around the edge of her shawl. He believed the Ashford name still meant justice. The accusation landed quietly. That made it sharper. William looked past her into the house. The room beyond was narrow and cold, lit by a single lamp and a weak fire. A boy of perhaps 10 sat beside an older man lying beneath patched blankets. On the table rested half a loaf of bread, a chipped bowl, and a silver pocket watch bearing the Ashford crest. William's breath stilled. He knew that watch. His father had carried it every day of his life. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Clara followed his gaze. "My father kept it for 18 years. From the bed, Thomas Bennet stirred. His face was pale, his voice barely stronger than the fire. "I did not steal from your father, Your Grace." William stepped across the threshold. Thomas opened his eyes and looked at him with the sorrow of a man who had been waiting far too long. "I tried to save him." Then his eyes closed, and the room fell silent except for the winter wind and the faint ticking of a watch that should have stopped years ago. Clara moved first. She crossed the room and pressed 2 fingers to her father's wrist, her expression composed even as fear tightened beneath it. "Noah, bring the water," she said. The boy obeyed at once, lifting the chipped cup with both hands. William remained beside the table, the forged agreement still in one hand and the silver watch in the other. He had not touched that crest since the day his father was buried. Yet here it was, resting in a house nearly empty of everything else. Edmund Pierce cleared his throat. "Your Grace, this proves nothing. The watch may have been taken years ago." Clara turned toward him. "Taken by a man who sold his winter coat to buy medicine?" Her voice was quiet, but Edmund looked away. William studied the room more carefully. The curtains had been patched with cloth from an old dress. A narrow shelf held 3 books, each worn from repeated reading. Near the hearth, a small stack of chopped branches had dwindled to 6 pieces. The fire was not weak because the Bennets lacked skill. It was weak because they had almost nothing left to burn. "How long has he been ill?" William asked. 7 weeks, Clara replied. "The doctor came once. We could not afford a second visit. And the money owed to my estate. We paid what we could until there was nothing left to sell." Noah returned to his father's side and placed the cup near Clara. William noticed the boy's plate on the table. A piece of bread remained untouched. Thomas's plate held twice as much. "You gave him your supper," William said. Noah lowered his eyes. "He needs it more." Something unfamiliar shifted in William's chest, faint but unwelcome. He looked at Clara. "Why keep the watch?" "Because my father said it belonged to you." "Then why did he not return it?" "He tried." Clara reached beneath the table and drew out a small wooden box. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. These were sent to Blackridge Hall over 18 years. None received an answer. Edmund stepped forward too quickly. Many letters are lost. Clara met his gaze. All 17. Silence settled over the room. Outside, snow struck the windows in soft, relentless waves. William untied the ribbon and examined the top envelope. His name had been written across it in an unsteady hand. The seal remained intact, but the corner bore the mark of the Ashford estate office. It had arrived. Someone had chosen not to deliver it. Thomas stirred again, his breathing shallow. Clara bent close. "Father, Duke Ashford is here." The older man opened his eyes with visible effort. His gaze moved to the watch in William's hand. "He trusted the wrong man," Thomas whispered. William leaned nearer. "Who?" Thomas's lips parted, but only a broken breath emerged. Clara reached for his hand. The old man looked toward Edmund Pierce, and for one suspended moment, fear passed across his face. Then his eyes closed again. William straightened slowly. Edmund's expression remained polite, almost concerned, but a thin line of tension had appeared along his jaw. William placed the forged agreement beside the unopened letters. "No one leaves this house," he said. Clara rose, her chin lifting. "We are not prisoners." "No," William replied, looking from the watch to the man on the bed. "But someone has spent 18 years making certain the truth never reached me." William ordered his driver to fetch Dr. Hale from the nearest town, 12 miles away, while the storm thickened beyond the windows. Clara watched him issue each command with the calm authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed, yet she noticed that he never once looked toward Edmund Pierce. The solicitor remained near the door, his gloves folded neatly in one hand, his expression smooth enough to reveal nothing. "Your Grace," Edmund said at last, "the road will soon be impassable. We should return to Blackridge Hall before nightfall." William turned the silver watch over in his palm. "We will return when Thomas Bennet can travel. And if he cannot, then we remain." Edmund's eyes flickered toward Clara before lowering. It was a small movement. William saw it. Clara did too. Noah added the final branch to the hearth, and the flame rose briefly before settling into a fragile glow. William removed his coat and placed it over the back of a chair. Without the heavy black wool around him, he seemed less like the distant master of Blackridge and more like a man carrying an old grief beneath perfect posture. Clara disliked noticing that. It was easier to resist cruelty than sorrow. "You said your father tried to save mine," William said. "What did he mean?" Clara looked toward the bed. "He never told me everything. He said the truth belonged to you, but that it could not be spoken until he placed the watch in your hands." "Convenient." Her gaze sharpened. "Nothing about our life has been convenient, Your Grace." The words held no anger, only exhaustion. William looked again at the patched curtains, the nearly bare shelves, and Noah warming his hands over a dying fire. Shame did not touch him easily, but something close to it moved beneath his ribs. He opened the first letter. The paper crackled softly. Thomas had written that a large sum had vanished from an Ashford account weeks before the elder Duke's death. He claimed the records had been altered and that the man responsible still controlled access to the estate books. The final line made William's breath catch. "The proof is hidden where only your father's heir would think to look." Edmund stepped closer. "May I examine it?" William folded the letter. No, for the first time, the solicitor's composure slipped. Only for a moment, but long enough. Clara crossed to the table and lifted the pocket watch. "There is something else." She pressed a tiny catch beneath the crest. The back opened, revealing a second compartment lined with dark blue velvet. It was empty. "My father used to keep a key here," she said. 3 nights ago, it disappeared." William's voice grew still. "Who entered this house?" Clara looked toward Edmund. "A messenger from the Ashford estate office." Edmund smiled faintly. "Many men serve that office." This one wore a silver pin shaped like a crow. The room seemed to contract around the words. William knew that symbol. It belonged to Silas Crow, the financial steward who had served his family since William was a boy. Before he could speak, Thomas opened his eyes. "Blackridge," he whispered. "The East Room." William moved to the bed. "What is there?" Thomas struggled for breath, then forced out 4 words. "Your father's missing ledger." Outside, the storm struck the house with renewed force, and somewhere beyond the windows, a horse began to approach. William crossed to the window and pulled aside the thin curtain. Through the driving snow, a lantern swayed between the trees, growing brighter as a rider approached the Bennett house. Edmund moved toward the door. "I will see who it is." "You will remain where I can see you," William said. The solicitor stopped. Clara felt the room change around those words. Until that moment, Edmund had stood beside the Duke as a trusted servant of the Ashford estate. Now he stood alone. The rider reached the house and dismounted. A moment later, someone knocked 3 times. Noah flinched. Clara placed a steady hand on his shoulder. William opened the door himself. Dr. Hale entered beneath a gray cloak dusted with snow, carrying a leather case and wearing an expression of grave concern. Behind him stood the Ashford driver. No one else had followed. William released a breath he had not realized he was holding. "See to Thomas Bennett," he said. Dr. Hale removed his gloves and approached the bed. Clara stepped aside, though every instinct urged her to remain close. The doctor listened to Thomas's breathing, checked his pulse, and examined the fever that had drained the older man's strength. Minutes passed with only the fire's faint crackle and the storm beyond the walls. At last, Dr. Hale looked up. "He needs warmth, rest, and medicine I do not have with me. Blackridge Hall is the safest place for him." Clara's gaze moved toward William. "The road is dangerous." "So is leaving him here," the doctor replied gently. William made the decision before fear could argue against it. "Prepare the carriage. We leave within the hour." Edmund stiffened. "Your Grace, bringing the Bennett family into Blackridge may cause questions." "Then let people ask them. Lady Margaret arrives tomorrow." William's expression cooled. "My father's missing ledger concerns me more than Lady Margaret's opinion." Clara heard the name, but did not ask who the woman was. She had no right to curiosity, and she would not grant herself one. Instead, she gathered Noah's coat, her father's medicines, and the bundle of letters. When she reached for the pocket watch, William placed his hand over it. Their fingers did not touch, yet the small space between them seemed suddenly charged with meaning. "This remains with me," he said. "It belonged to your father, and the truth hidden inside it may belong to mine." William studied her face. She was afraid. He could see it now in the careful stillness of her mouth and the way she held herself too straight. Yet she did not plead. "You will have access to every record I permit," he said. "That is not the same as trust. Trust must be earned." Clara lifted her chin. "By both of us." The answer should have angered him. Instead, it followed him as the household prepared to depart. Thomas was carried carefully to the carriage and wrapped in blankets. Noah climbed in beside him. Clara paused at the threshold, looking back at the little room with its fading fire and worn furniture. It was the only home she had known. William stood behind her. "You will return," he said. "Can you promise that?" He looked at the forged agreement in his hand, then toward Edmund waiting beneath the snow. "No," William answered, "but I can promise this. Before any debt is collected, I will know who created it." Clara stepped into the storm. William followed. By the time the carriage turned toward Blackridge Hall, the final light had left the sky, and the east room waited in darkness. Blackridge Hall emerged through the snow like a fortress carved from winter itself, its stone towers dark against the pale night, its windows glowing with restrained warmth. Clara stepped from the carriage with Noah beside her while Dr. Hale directed the servants carrying Thomas inside. The entrance hall was vast, lined with portraits whose painted eyes seemed to follow every movement. A chandelier burned above them, yet the marble floor held the cold of the storm. Clara felt the difference between her world and William's in every polished surface. He could lose a room and never notice. Her family could lose a chair and feel the absence for years. "Mrs. Whitmore," William called. The housekeeper appeared from a side corridor, dressed in severe black silk. Her expression changed when she saw Clara's worn shawl and Noah's patched coat, but her bow remained perfect. "Prepare rooms near the West Infirmary. Mr. Bennett is under Dr. Hale's care. His children are my guests." Edmund Pierce entered behind them. "Your Grace, perhaps guests is too generous a word." William turned slowly. "Then consider it an instruction rather than a description." Edmund lowered his head. Clara noticed several servants exchange glances. The story had already begun to travel through the house. By morning, everyone would know the Duke had brought a debtor's daughter beneath his roof. Thomas was taken upstairs, and Noah followed after Clara promised she would join him soon. William led her through a long corridor paneled in dark oak. Their footsteps echoed between portraits of dead Ashfords. At the far end stood a pair of carved doors secured by an iron lock. "The East Room," Clara said. William stopped. "It has been closed since my father died." "And you never entered?" "Once. On the morning after his funeral. The room had been cleared." Clara looked at the lock. Dust lay across it, except around the keyhole. "Someone has opened it recently." William's eyes narrowed. He called for the steward's keys, but none fit. Edmund arrived moments later, breathing slightly harder than the walk required. "That lock was changed years ago," he said. "By whom?" William asked. "Silas Crowe managed the renovations." The name settled between them like another shadow. Clara knelt near the door and examined a pale mark on the wood. "This was made by a key, not forced entry." Edmund gave a quiet laugh. "Miss Bennet appears to possess many convenient talents." Clara rose. "Poverty teaches observation. Mistakes are expensive when there is no money to hide them." William looked at her, and for the first time that night, something close to admiration softened his expression. It vanished when a woman's voice sounded from behind them. "William, I was told you had returned with strangers." Lady Margaret Vale approached in deep green velvet, her fair hair arranged flawlessly despite the late hour. Her gaze moved over Clara from head to toe before settling on William. "You did not mention inviting company." "There was no time." "Clearly." Lady Margaret smiled without warmth. "And who is this?" Clara answered before William could. "Clara Bennet." Recognition brightened Margaret's eyes. "The debtor's daughter." William's jaw tightened. Clara felt the insult, but she refused to lower her gaze. "Yes," she said, "and perhaps the only person in this house willing to find out why the dead exists." Silence followed. Lady Margaret's smile faded. William turned to the locked doors. "Tomorrow morning, this room will be opened." Edmund's hand closed around his gloves. "And if there is nothing inside?" William looked at Clara. "Then she has 30 days to prove there should have been." Clara faced him fully. 30 days for what?" "To find the missing ledger and clear your father's name." "And if I fail?" William's voice became quiet. "The debt stands." Clara held his gaze. "Then add one condition." "Name it." "When I prove the truth, you will apologize to my father while he is still alive." William hesitated only once. "Agreed." The East Room was opened at 8 the next morning. William had summoned a locksmith from the village before dawn, and by the time the final bolt turned, half the household seemed to know what was happening. Clara stood beside him in a simple gray dress borrowed from Mrs. Whitmore, while Lady Margaret watched from the corridor with a curiosity she made no effort to hide. Edmund remained near the staircase, his face composed, his hands clasped behind his back. The doors opened with a low groan. Cold air drifted from the room beyond, carrying the scent of dust, old paper, and extinguished fires. Heavy curtains covered the windows. White sheets concealed the furniture. A portrait of William's father hung above the fireplace, his painted expression stern and distant. William stopped beneath it. For a moment, the Duke disappeared, and Clara saw only a son standing before a man who could no longer answer him. "We should begin with the desk," she said softly. William nodded. The drawers had been emptied, but Clara noticed scratches beneath the lowest one. She knelt and pressed along the wooden frame until a narrow panel loosened. Inside lay several burned letters, a brass key, and a ledger with 3 pages carefully removed. Edmund stepped forward. "That proves the room was searched years ago." "No," Clara said. She lifted the ledger toward the window. "The dust beneath it is lighter than the dust around it. Someone moved this recently." Lady Margaret gave a faint smile. "You seem remarkably familiar with hiding places, Miss Bennet." Clara rose without haste. "People who own little learn to protect what matters." Margaret's gaze sharpened. "And people who own much often learn to invent reasons they should not pay." William said nothing. The silence wounded Clara more deeply than the insult. She placed the ledger on the desk and opened it. The missing pages covered the month before the elder Duke's death. Every entry before and after had been signed by Thomas Bennet, except for one note in a different hand. "Transfer approved by S. Crowe." William leaned closer. "Silas." Edmund's voice came too quickly. "Initials are not proof." Clara turned a burned letter beneath the light. Only a few lines remained visible, but one sentence had survived. "Thomas has discovered the northern account. He must be silenced before William returns." The words seemed to darken the room. William took the page from her, his expression unreadable. Who wrote this? The seal is gone, Edmund said. It could have been placed here by anyone. Clara looked at William. Do you believe that? He did not answer at once. His eyes moved from the letter to the hidden panel, then to the portrait above the fireplace. I believe someone wanted us to find only part of the truth. Clara's hope flickered. Then William added, and I believe you knew more about this room than you admitted. Her face went still. My father told me there was a ledger here. Nothing more. Yet you found the compartment within minutes. Because I looked. Or because you knew where it was. The accusation struck with quiet force. Clara closed the ledger. Then perhaps you should search without me. She placed the brass key in his palm. I came to clear my father's name, not to trade my dignity for your belief. William's fingers closed around the key. He wanted to call her back as she walked toward the doors, but pride held him silent. Clara reached the corridor and stopped. Edmund Pierce was gone. On the floor where he had stood lay a silver pin shaped like a crow. Clara bent and lifted the silver pin from the floor. Its shape was unmistakable. A crow with its wings folded against its body, polished to a dull shine by years of use. William took it from her and turned it beneath the morning light. This belongs to Silas Crow, he said. Then why was Edmund wearing it? Clara asked. William looked toward the empty corridor. The answer came too easily and too late. Edmund had not served the Ashford family long enough to earn William's trust, yet he had handled every letter, every account, and every legal notice connected to the Bennett debt. William closed his hand around the pin. Find Pierce, he ordered the nearest footman. Quietly, Clara returned to the East Room and gathered the damaged ledger. I am taking this to my father. You are doing no such thing. William's voice was firm, but the old certainty had gone from it. You questioned my honesty 5 minutes ago. And I was wrong. The word stopped her. William Ashford was not a man who apologized easily. Even now, pride made the admission sound like a confession made under oath. Clara faced him. Wrong about what? About you knowing where the compartment was. And my father? William glanced at the burned letter. I do not know yet. Her expression cooled. Then we are not finished. They carried the ledger to Thomas's room, where Dr. Hale had lowered the fever but warned that the older man remained weak. Noah slept in a chair beside the bed, his small hand resting near his father's. Clara opened the book to the altered accounts. Thomas's eyes moved slowly over the page. Silas, he whispered. He changed the northern figures after the Duke refused his proposal. William stepped closer. What proposal? To sell tenant lands and hide the profit through private accounts. Thomas swallowed with effort. Your father discovered it. He planned to dismiss Crow and expose everyone involved. Everyone. Thomas's gaze shifted toward the door. Crow was not alone. Before he could say more, smoke drifted beneath it. Clara smelled it first. Something is burning. William opened the door. A servant was already running down the corridor, calling for water. Gray smoke curled from the lower floor near the archive wing. William's face hardened. The records. Clara seized the ledger. The missing pages may be there. You will stay with your father. No, she met his eyes. This truth has cost him 18 years. I will not let it disappear now. They reached the archive corridor as servants carried buckets from the kitchen. The fire had begun behind a locked door, contained but spreading through shelves of paper. William ordered everyone back while the steward found the key. Clara noticed a narrow service entrance at the far end. There is another way inside. Clara, you asked me to prove the truth, not at the cost of your safety. She looked at him, startled by the fear in his voice. For one moment, neither moved. Then the service door opened from within, and Edmund Pierce emerged through the smoke carrying a leather case. He froze when he saw them. William's voice became dangerously calm. Put it down. Edmund's eyes moved toward the stairwell. You do not understand. Clara saw the brass key protruding from the case and recognized it at once. That came from the East Room. Edmund tightened his grip. William stepped forward, but Edmund dropped the case and fled down the opposite passage. The leather lid opened when it struck the floor. Inside lay the 3 missing ledger pages, 17 unopened letters, and a sealed document bearing Silas Crow's name. Clara knelt beside it, her hands trembling. William looked at the smoke gathering above them, then at the evidence someone had tried to erase. Take the case, he said. I will see that the fire is contained. Clara rose. And Edmund? William's gray eyes followed the empty corridor. He has spent years hiding behind another man's shadow. Before this day ends, we will learn whose orders he was obeying. By late afternoon, the fire had been contained, though the archive walls still breathed the faint scent of smoke. William ordered the great hall prepared and summoned every person connected to the Ashford accounts. Landowners, clerks, household officers, and village witnesses gathered beneath the high windows while winter light faded across the stone floor. Clara stood near her father's chair with Noah beside her. Thomas was pale but awake, wrapped in blankets and supported by Dr. Hale. Across the hall, Edmund Pierce waited between two estate guards, his composure finally broken. Silas Crowe arrived last. He wore a dark coat, silver spectacles, and the calm expression of a man who had spent years believing himself untouchable. Lady Margaret watched from beside the fireplace, saying nothing. William entered carrying the leather case. Conversation ceased. 18 years ago, he began, money vanished from the Northern estate account. Thomas Bennet was accused, dismissed, and forced to accept a debt he could never repay. Silas inclined his head. A regrettable matter, Your Grace, but the records were clear. William placed the missing pages on the long table. These records. Silas's face did not change, but Edmund looked down. Clara stepped forward and opened the damaged ledger. The original entries were removed and replaced. The false pages carry my father's signature. The hidden pages show transfers approved through accounts controlled by Silas Crowe. Murmurs moved through the hall. Silas adjusted his spectacles. A clever reconstruction, but hardly proof. Miss Bennet has every reason to create a convenient story. Clara felt every eye turn toward her. Months of hunger, years of whispers, and every insult endured by her family seemed to stand with her in that room. Still, she did not lower her head. You are correct, she said. Pages can be forged. Letters can be hidden. Even signatures can be copied. She looked toward William. But a man who expects betrayal learns to hide truth where no clerk would search. William understood. He removed his father's silver watch and placed it in her hand. Clara opened the secret compartment. It appeared empty, as it had before. Then she pressed the blue velvet lining and lifted its narrow edge. Beneath it lay a strip of paper no wider than her finger. William unfolded it carefully. Written in the elder Duke's hand were account numbers, dates, and a single sentence. Crowe has used Pierce as his intermediary. Thomas Bennet alone warned me. Edmund closed his eyes. Silas took one step backward. William read the words aloud. The silence afterward felt heavier than judgment. Tell them, William said to Edmund. The solicitor's voice trembled. Mr. Crowe promised my father security. The letters were intercepted. The accounts were altered. The debt was created to keep Mr. Bennet silent. Silas turned sharply. You weak fool. William's gaze hardened. No, the weakness was mine. I trusted inheritance more than evidence and pride more than a dying man's word. He faced the assembled guests, then walked to Thomas Bennet. Before everyone who had once believed the accusation, the Duke of Blackridge lowered his head. Mr. Bennet, my family wronged you. I wronged you. The debt is erased, your home is restored, and your name will be cleared in every county record before the week is over. Thomas's eyes filled with quiet relief. Clara stood motionless, unable to speak. William turned to her. You asked for justice while he was still alive. His voice softened. It should never have required your courage to awaken mine. Clara looked at the man who had arrived at her door as a creditor and now stood before her stripped of certainty. For the first time, she saw no duke, no title, no power. Only a wounded son who had finally chosen truth. Yet before she could answer, Lady Margaret approached and placed a sealed letter on the table. There is one more account you have not examined, she said, and it concerns the night your father died. Lady Margaret's letter had been written by the elder Duke Ashford on the final evening of his life. The seal was broken, but the handwriting matched the strip hidden inside the watch. William read in silence while the great hall waited. His father had discovered the fraud and planned to expose Silas Crowe at dawn. He had also written that Thomas Bennet was to be protected, rewarded, and trusted above every officer in the estate. The final lines were not about money. They were for William. Pride is a poor inheritance, my son. Do not let it make you lonely. William lowered the letter. For years, he had believed his father died ashamed and betrayed. Now he understood that the elder Duke had spent his final hours trying to restore justice. Silas had not destroyed the Ashford name. Silence had. William ordered the remaining evidence placed under official seal and directed the county magistrate to begin a full inquiry. Edmund agreed to testify. Silas was escorted from the hall without spectacle, his power ending not with chaos, but with the simple reading of truth before witnesses. Lady Margaret approached William once the room had emptied. "Your father gave me that letter for safekeeping," she said. "He feared the estate office had been compromised. Why did you wait?" "Because until today, you trusted the men around you more than the questions before you." Her gaze moved toward Clara. She changed that. Margaret left Blackridge the following morning, not in anger, but with the quiet dignity of a woman who understood that affection could not be arranged like land or title. Thomas recovered slowly. Within 2 weeks, he could sit near the library fire and tell William the full story of the stolen accounts. Noah discovered the stables, the kitchens, and every staircase misses. Whitmore had forbidden him to climb. Clara remained until her father was strong enough to travel. She and William spent many evenings reviewing the restored records, though the work between them had changed. Their silences no longer felt hostile. Sometimes their hands reached for the same page and paused. Sometimes William caught her smiling at Noah and forgot the question he meant to ask. Yet Clara never mistook tenderness for justice, and William never asked her to. When the Bennett house was repaired and the family name cleared, Clara prepared to leave. William met her beside the carriage. "Blackridge has rooms enough," he said. "That is not the same as belonging." He looked at her for a long moment. "No, it is not." She waited, but he made no command. That was how she knew he had changed. Clara returned home with her father and brother. Winter softened. Snow withdrew from the fields, and the first green shoots appeared beside the road. 3 weeks later, a solitary rider stopped outside the Bennett house. William had brought no solicitor, no servants, and no papers bearing a seal. Clara opened the door and found him standing where he had once come to take everything. "The first time I stood here," he said, "I believed everything beyond this door belonged to me." His voice was quieter than she remembered. "I have returned to ask whether I may enter." Clara studied the man before her. He was still a duke, still proud, still wounded. But he had learned that love was not collected, inherited, or demanded. It was offered freely and received with humility. She opened the door wider. William stepped inside, not as a creditor, but as a man who had finally understood the value of what could never be owned. Some debts are paid with gold. Others are forgiven only when pride finally kneels before truth.